Hi guys, and welcome to a video about some authors that I either am not going to be reading from anymore, or I don't plan to, or that I'm on the fence with. Now, I am going to say this has nothing to do with an author's political opinion, religious opinion, or any general opinion. It has nothing to do with that. This is just the author's writing style. That I have learned is just not for me. And there are authors like that for everyone. You're not going to like every author that you pick up. So I just wanted to say these are some authors I'm unsure about. Some of them I am asking for your advice on, as far as you think there's a better written book or something. So let's go ahead and get into this. It will make more sense as the video goes on. And I have nothing against any of these authors. It's just I don't know if their writing style is really my taste, or things that I will enjoy in the future. And I don't, and that's the thing. When I started BookTube, I was like, well, I have to give every single author a try, multiple tries, and I have to read a certain type of book in order to be able to create videos. And it's taken me a while to go, I wouldn't expect that of anyone else, so why should I expect that of myself? So it's taken a lot of thinking and stuff, and I still struggle with a lot of the thoughts with that, but I am putting this out there to hold myself accountable that it is okay not to read every book and not to enjoy the writing of authors that are more popular, if that makes sense. I think this will make sense as it goes on. So let's go ahead and dive right into this. So I have 7 authors to talk about. Number 1, and these are in no particular order, this just happened to come to my mind. So number 1 is Anna Marie Mclemore. Anna Marie Mclemore, my first introduction was Wild Beauty, which I DNF'd. My problem with Anna Marie Mclemore's books is, 1, the premise and the synopsis sound good, but I don't feel like it's executed well. That's the only book by Anna Marie Mclemore that I have ever tried to read was Wild Beauty. I am nervous about wanting to pick up another book by this author, but I am much more willing to. My question to you is, if you have read a book by Anna Marie Mclemore, what is your favorite book by that author? Wild Beauty, I felt like it was flat. So you have this group of women that live in this area where basically men don't survive. And so it's all women for a while, and then this man is in this field, or this boy, and they're trying to figure out how he got there, what's going to happen, and all that stuff. And the girls or the women can't leave because if they leave the area, they'll die. So that's the basic gist. I thought it sounded very good. I also liked the idea that someone can take their hands and create flowers. They can give life to plants. And I'm not talking just by planting and watering. I'm talking like magical abilities. Like flowers literally coming out of your hands and literally giving the flowers life just by like touching it. So that's the reason why I'm nervous about Anna Marie Mclemore. There are other books that have sounded good, but I'm just nervous that it's not going to be as well executed as it sounds, if that makes sense. And I just don't want to be disappointed. I am very much willing to check out a book by Anna Marie Mclemore at the library to give this author another shot. I just don't know which book I should try. So if you've read from this author, let me know what your favorite book was from that author. Wild Beauty I did not like, so I will not try to reread that one again, or I will not try to reread it. So I felt like the characters were flat. Here's the thing. So you have these cousins, and I got over halfway in the book and I could not tell you the difference between any of the cousins. It was like a cookie cutter cutout. You had the same person just with a different name, and then you had the same person with another name, and I just felt like everything was way too similar. And even with the aunts, I had trouble telling. I'm like, okay, wait, now which aunt is this, or is this this character's mother? Or so it's like I just couldn't tell them apart, and I can't deal with that because then I don't enjoy the book, and I'm questioning things a lot more than rather than just getting immersed in the world and enjoying it. So that was my problem with Anna Marie Mclemore, with that book that I read. So I am willing to give Anna Marie Mclemore another shot. I just don't know where to start. So, okay, the second one I have written down is Taylor Jenkins Reid. I know people love Taylor Jenkins Reid. I have a book on my shelf by Taylor Jenkins Reid. I can't remember the title. It's like The Seven Lives or The Seven Deaths something. And I know there's a book with a similar title by a completely different author. I'm nervous about picking that up. I read Malibu Rising and Daisy Jones and the Six. Daisy Jones and the Six, in my opinion, was better than Malibu Rising. I absolutely hate when the cheating is done over and over and over in a book. I get that it can help with character development and plot development if it's done a small handful of times, but not continually repeated over and over. Then it's just redundant and way too repetitive, and I think it detracts more than it helps, or hinders more than it helps, or something like that. Anyway, so those two books, Malibu Rising and Daisy Jones and the Six, I don't even remember. I think, did I give one 2-star and one 3-star? If either of them got a 3-star, it was a low 3-star. Yeah, I'm not sure that writing is for me, just because I feel like it's a little clunky. I don't feel like the writing is smooth enough for me to get immersed in the world, and I know people have been able to. But for me, I have struggled with really immersing and enjoying those books. So Taylor Jenkins Reid may not be an author for me because of their writing style. It just may not be something that suits my tastes, and that's fine. I do have another book by this author. Like I had said before, I am on the fence if I should try this third book, or because I've read the 2 books and didn't enjoy them, just unhaul the third one and don't even bother. That's what I'm on the fence with Taylor Jenkins Reid. So let me know your opinions on that. The third author, unless the books sound really good, and unless there's this one change, I'm not going to pick up another book by this author, and that's quotation marks. This author is known, from what I have heard, for not using quotation marks. I did not know that was a stylistic choice on the author. I thought that was a publisher's mistake. So, and that is Sally Rooney. I thought, I think the synopsis and when people talk about it, the books sound really good, but I can't handle there not being quotation marks. It doesn't make me angry or anything. It messes with my mind to the point that I don't enjoy the book. It feels disjointed to me, and I am at very much a disconnect from any of the characters, any of the plot, or anything because of that. And here's why. I'll be reading along, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh wait, I'm in the middle of this paragraph that is actually a conversation or something that this character is talking about. Okay, and then the conversation will end, and all of a sudden I'm in a description, but I had no indication that the conversation was over or that the description of something was over, and now that we're all of a sudden in a conversation. That was too jarring, is the word for me. It was too, I just can't deal with that. I personally, for my mind, need the quotation marks to indicate when something is being said, and there's a conversation, conversation things are being said, but things like that. So just because of that, and that saddens me because those books sound really good, by Sally Rooney. So that's the only reason why I don't think I'll be reading from Sally Rooney, unless all of a sudden I hear that they have made the adjustment and have put quotation marks in it. I'm not saying that has to happen. That just means if it doesn't, it's just not going to be the writing style that is good for me to read, because it's so jarring, and I just have very much a lot of trouble with that. So, okay. Number 4, I know this is a well-loved author, and I want to, they're all well-loved authors, and I want to enjoy all of these. One thing I have learned with starting book 2 is that a horror book does not equal scary all the time. I wish it did, because sometimes I do want to read a scary book. That's more like a thriller, but even then, some thrillers are not really all that scary. So it's just finding what you like. But But then it's like you think of the horror genre in movies, you think of more scary, you know? And sometimes I just want a good scary book. Horror is more, when I've researched it, is more along the lines of something that's disturbing. It could be a bunch of rape in it. That would be very disturbing, and that would classify as horror. Dismemberment and a lot of like body damage or dismemberment, beheadings, all of that could classify as horror. It's not necessarily scary. It's there for shock value and to be very disturbing. Animal cruelty could fall into another thing if the book is just about that. So that's what I have learned from doing research on that. This author is known as the King of Horror, and that is Stephen King. I read Christine by Stephen King, which is the one that's about that possessed demonic car. I found it predictable and kind of boring. And the book sounds so good. There's 2 other books by Stephen King that I tried to read that I ended up DNFing. Only because I was not in the right headspace and other things were coming up. I couldn't devote the time because these 2 books are huge. Or they're big chunkers. And that's It and Tommyknockers. Tommyknockers I got about halfway. It was due back at the library. I couldn't renew it. And by that time it was like, nothing's really happened by this point anyway. You're still learning about the characters and things like that. So I went ahead and let it go back to the library. I do want to pick it back up at some point, but I don't know. The other thing, it was It, and for that book, I just was definitely not in the right headspace. I was trying to force my way to read that book when I was really wanting to read like a fantasy or a science fiction or something. So it was just not what I was really wanting at that time. So I ended up DNFing it. I do have Carrie on my Kindle, and I have seen the original movie. And so knowing that most of the time I like the book better than the movie, I really want to read the book, Carrie. So I have that. I'm just unsure and I'm nervous. Mostly because I know that I thought the book Christine was boring, so I'm nervous about reading Carrie. But I am going to give it a shot at some point. I don't know when, but yes. So that's an author. Stephen King is an author that I am unsure of just because I haven't found, obviously, one that I like, but I haven't read a lot by Stephen King, and he's got a lot of books out there. The next 3 are ones that I don't plan on reading again, just because of how sexually explicit their books can be. I thought that the parts of the book that did not contain the sexually explicit scenes were well written and I enjoyed. But I'm just a little nervous about these authors. So one of them is Karen Marie Moaning. Karen wrote the Dark Fever series, and I read the first 2 or 3 and enjoyed. There were parts that did start to tease with sexually explicit stuff, so I would have said due to the innuendo and some of the words that were used, it would have been like a PG-13 in a movie. When I got to the end of it was either the end of the 2nd or the end of the 3rd book. I don't remember which, but it like all of a sudden went from a PG-13 to a very hard R, and and it's like I could kind of see why it needed to be there. Because in the Dark Fever series, you have these fairies, or they're called fae, and that if people, when they're around, people's sexual desires and lusts really increase like tenfold, to the point that they're stripping in the streets and they're wanting to have sex with that fairy. And they don't care if it's out in the open. And if they have sex with that fairy, then that's all they ever want. They'll do anything to have more sex by that fairy, to the point that they will die for that sex, if that makes sense. So I thought it was a little overkill, but I could kind of see where that scene was coming from. I didn't like it because it was very graphic, and 2, it was basically a gang rape. And it was very uncomfortable, but it was very explicit. So I tried to give the next book in the series a shot, and it basically picked up right with the character having sex with some other character, and it was graphic, and it was like the sex by the fairies was so good that the character couldn't remember anything else, not their name, not where they came from, their origin of birth, their parents' name, or anything. And the only way to cure him of that was to have more sex. But I don't know, it was weird. I didn't like it. I'm not going to continue the series, and it's a long series. I don't know, and I'll have to do some research if Karen Marie Moaning has written more books. But knowing what this Dark Fever series contains in it, as far as how sexually explicit it is, I don't know if this author is for me. I do like to read romance, but romance does not have to have sexually explicit stuff. It can start to get tense, and you can go, okay, they're going to go have sex, and then it turns out to a fade to black, or it's a very passionate kissing. But when it gets in bed graphic, sexually explicit to the point that it's like an R rating in a movie, I have no interest in that. PG-13 I can get uncomfortable with, but I can generally read through it because it's nowhere near as an R, although sometimes it can be. Anyway, so I'm nervous about trying any more Karen Marie Moaning, and I probably won't put the effort into trying to read the author again, just because I know how graphic that series got. The other author where it's the same thing, kind of, is Jennifer L Armentrout. And I know people love Jennifer L Armentrout. They talk about this book series that is very steamy. Now, that is a relative term. And it kind of bugs me because it's like, okay, are you talking like PG-13 fade to black type of steam where there's just tension and they make out, or hardcore sexually explicit are leading into an X? Which X I would consider like more erotic books, which I will not even pick up. So I do like romance. I just don't like the sexually explicit stuff. And not all romance has the sexually explicit stuff in it. You're just going to encounter more of it. So I am very careful with... I'm willing to pick up pretty much any book that is labeled romance, but I'm also to the point now where I will DNF any book that is romance if it gets to a very explicit scene. And sexual explicit scenes aren't always in just romance. They can be in any genre. So Jennifer L Armentrout, I read, I think it was Wicked was the series. I thought it was well written. I just thought it was just too sexually explicit for me. And so I was on the fence of, should I continue? But then I heard the sex just increases or continues. And so I was like, no, I'm done with the series. Now, Jennifer L Armentrout, and that was Jennifer's adult series or adult books. Jennifer has also written a YA book. I think I have a YA book by Jennifer L Armentrout on my bookshelf. I have to double check. But I am nervous about reading the YA. But I am more willing to because I know it's YA, and so I don't think the author would be allowed to write such a sexually explicit book as a YA compared to an adult, if that makes sense. So I did like the writing, so I will definitely try the young adult from this author, but I don't think I will pick up adult books by that author again, if that makes sense. Okay. The other author, I absolutely loved the plot, and I liked how the books were written, except when it came to the sexually explicit. And it was kind of... I think what bothered me more about the sex scenes in this is it was more sudden, and there wasn't... the sexual tension will build up, but then it's like, bam, they're all of a sudden having sex, and it's pretty graphic. It's not the most graphic sex I've read, but anyway, and that's Talia Hibbert. I have liked the writing by Talia Hibbert. I just don't like reading the sex scenes. I did read the Brown Sisters series. I thought everything was written well, including the sex scenes. It was just too graphic for me. But I forced myself to read it because I felt like in a way, I kind of had to in order to have a true voice. And it doesn't matter what I read. I can have a voice no matter what I read. So I did read that. I especially liked with the Brown Sisters series, my favorite was the third book, and I felt like the writing got better as the series went on. So if you don't care about sexually explicit or you like the sexually explicit stuff, I can't say how well specifically the sexually explicit stuff was written, but overall the books were written well, I think. And I really liked the third one because I liked the autism rep. I felt like in the third book, my favorite scene was right at the beginning with the man that ran the hotel or whatever it was, and that he had to go to the hospital. And it's like he comes back from the hospital and he's doped up on the drugs, and or was it before? Anyway, it's right around that accident scene at the very beginning, and the friend is like, if you don't do this, I'm going to go and I'm going to unarrange all of your socks. I am very particular with how my socks are arranged, and so that character's reaction was like spot on in my opinion, because I would have done the same thing, like, no, don't touch them, so I'm very particular with that too. So, and I get it. And it was a bonus that the character was autistic, and you got some insight as far as like the thinking and things that character has struggled with. And the main character is not the only autistic character in that book. And so to read about this other character that's not really diagnosed as autism was cool. So, yeah. So I did like that. And I think that Talia Hibbert has a very good talent and a gift for writing relatable characters. You have the chronic illness rep or the chronic pain rep. You have people with anxiety on different levels. You have some mild anxiety, some severe anxiety. You have undiagnosed autism. You have diagnosed autism. So Talia Hibbert has a gift, in my opinion, of writing relatable characters. I just don't like the graphic sex. So unless I know that, I'd have to research more, but I'm not sure that Talia Hibbert has written anything other than adult. There was another series I did try to read, and it was just as sexually explicit as the other one. I don't remember what that series was called, but I did try. But I'm not going to continue the series just because I don't want to read about the sex. So that's it for this video, though. That's it. So as you can see, nothing was because of beliefs. Nothing was, it was just their writing style. And I personally just don't like reading sexually explicit stuff. So, and I would try to force myself to read it because I thought, I'm an adult, I should be reading this, even though I don't really like it. I should be reading, and not always reading YA or clean or, anyway. That was just my own mind, and I had to get out of it. So, yay, I'm out of that mindset. I'll read whatever the heck I want. And that's that. I did, like I said, it has nothing to do with political, religious, or any sort of opinions as far as what the author has. It's just their writing style is more than likely not for me or the type of stuff that I like to read. Whether it's just because of the sex, but everything else is good, or particular styles, and if I find an author boring or not. I don't know. Anyway, so that's it. I'm not trying to bash on these authors. I'm just letting you know these are authors I'm unsure about. If you've read from these authors and you know that they have, like especially Talia Hibbert, Jennifer L Armentrout, and Karen Marie Moaning, if you have read a book by that author that does not contain the sexually explicit scenes, please let me know. I would absolutely love to try to read more from these authors. I felt like they do write well. So yeah, so that's going to be it for now. Again, if you have a favorite book by this author, definitely let me know. But again, if it's sexually explicit, I'm not going to read it. So anyway, but if you like that stuff, great. I'm glad you do. And I hope you enjoyed those authors. So that's going to be it for this video. At this point, I'm just trying to ramble. So I'm going to end it now officially. So until next time, stay true to yourself and enjoy a good book. And I'll talk to you later.